Hi guys, Bran here, and welcome to another commentary video. Today we're going to be referencing back to that Scrump video that talked about is DBD dying, but the homie flipped the script and said of course it's not, and talked about all these ASIMs that did die and what caused them to die, because there was something in that video that I did not cover having to do with that topic that I think is like really important, because there's been a lot of conversations in the DBD community lately of like, is DBD past its prime? Is DBD like, is the heyday of the game just over? And I feel like there's some really smart stuff that was referenced in that video that I want to double down on and conversate with you about. So let's go ahead and talk about this theme that if you're on this channel you probably heard before: fun at other people's expense, and how that's a little bit more dangerous than you think. So right, like I said, I referenced the Scrump video, talking about is DBD dying. Scrump ended up going into a lot of different ASIMs talking about why they died, and one of them is Friday the 13th. And the thing that I always found super interesting about this video was that Scrump goes out on a limb, and obviously, first and foremost, Friday the 13th mostly died because of, copyright issues. And that's the whole thing. I won't get into that. It's a tale as old as time. I'm sure you've heard it before, and I would not be able to explain it in any fast layman's terms. But essentially all you need to know, TLDR, is like they lost the rights to the character and the IP, and the entire game's built on one IP, so obviously that that crashed everything. But the thing that Scrump said that really stuck out to me, that is kind of a hot take, but it's one that I actually agree with, is that Friday the 13th probably wouldn't have lasted, and definitely wouldn't have lasted so long that it beat Dead by Daylight, because of one specific reason. And as somebody who did play and enjoy Friday the 13th, I played a little bit past the prime, so like I, take with that what you will. But Friday the 13th, according to Scrump, probably wouldn't have lasted because it was kind of just a bully Jason simulator for the most part. If you didn't know this, Friday the 13th functioned very differently to Dead by Daylight. In Dead by Daylight, the survivors are essentially helpless. Even the ones that could probably beat up most of the killers, like Leon, Chris Redfield, Carlos, Jill, even the characters that would probably beat like half the killer roster if they got into like a fist fight, the survivors are rendered helpless in the entity's realm. They are not able to do anything besides drop the pallets to defend themselves. Of course, there's like flashlights, flashbangs, stuff like that, but for the most part, they really can't do anything to fight back against the killers. Whereas Friday the 13th is kind of the opposite. There's weapons all over the place that you pick up to stun Jason, put him in stun loops. That's familiar in another gun media game that they recently had to adjust for a very similar reason. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, you could literally get a gun and shoot Jason. There was a way to actually straight up just murder Jason. It was a little bit more complicated, but most players have been playing the game for more than 10 hours knew how to do it. And if you had a group, you definitely could do it super easy. And also the pocket knife system, which, I don't hate, because, well, Jason could insta-kill you, but if you had people that were just like stacking a bunch, and you no matter how much you outplayed them, they could just insta-knife you to stop you from killing them. Essentially, the camp counselors in Friday the 13th could just very heavily bully Jason. And it gets worse because there was kind of like a meta to playing Jason, because some couldn't even run. Some Jasons couldn't even run. Most of the zombie versions of Jason, which is like the later movies of Jason that existed in the game, they can only walk. So they couldn't even like catch up to the survivors a lot of the time. So it was just kind of like a very unbalanced mess. It was a very unbalanced mess. And it was kind of just like, for a lot of the time, just kind of like a bully simulator. It was kind of just a bully simulator. It was just, you could just beat up Jason and make fun of him and make him feel like crap. So Scrump says for that reason in particular that the game would not last, because there's somebody on the other end of that. There's somebody on the other end of that situation, somebody on the other end of that scenario who is getting miserable because they're supposed to be playing one of the most hulking and intimidating and very cool horror IPs in all of like horror history, but they're being treated like a baby, which just doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good. So the TLDR is like, essentially the game would eventually die out, not because of the, what it ended up dying out from, which was the copyright issues, but it was going to eventually die out because, in an ASIM, in DBD it's a 4v1, there is a one person on the other end of the 4, right? There's somebody who is on the receiving end of that bullying, of that bully squad, that's being made to be miserable, and those people over time stop playing the game. I mean, we saw that with VHS, right? VHS went the same way, whereas like you know, it was really, really fun for the 14s to just constantly ambush the monster and make them feel terrible. But over time, Monster stopped playing the game. Monster players stopped playing the game because they didn't like just being served up on a silver platter for a bully simulator. They didn't enjoy it. So over time, they stopped playing the game. And it really murdered their queue times and made the game start to die out. So I think it's funny that we talk about now as like, you know, kind of another existential panic of like, hey, you know, is DBD past its prime? Is DBD no longer as fun as it used to be? Which is something I see a lot, and mostly when the people are saying DBD isn't as fun as it used to be, it's usually coming from people who play Survivor, because DBD used to have a lot of aspects and items and perks in the game that kind of did make it more similar to Friday the 13th, more similar to VHS, where you could just kind of like, and no layman's terms, kind of just bully the killer. Old DS Unbreakable comes to mind. Slug me, I get back up. You pick me up, I just DS you. I mean, there's just kind of like there's so many situations where it was just a lose-lose. There's nothing you could do to win. And, you know, obviously if you have been around the DBD community, you've heard of all like old DPIP squads, people that would intentionally run this stuff that didn't really have good counterplay or any at all, and just to enforce killers to DPIP and make them miserable. It's just stuff like that just does not exist in the game anymore. And it's funny to hear people go back and say like, oh, well, the game's past its prime, or the game's not as fun as it used to be. And it's like, well, yeah, you say that because you were having fun at someone else's expense. You were having fun at the killer's expense. You were putting them in lose-lose situations that just felt terrible. And I feel like VHS, I feel like if this continued to go on for a very, very long extended period of time with no signs of improvement in the future, I feel like DBD actually would start dying. I feel like Dead by Daylight actually would, for realsies, actually start dying off, because I feel like people would just kind of like stop playing the game after a while. I mean, you saw that on the opposite end of things. You want to take it to the other end of things. Like when the Overbrine Eruption meta was a thing, and that was super impressive, there was a lot of Survivor players that just kind of like quit the game and didn't play at that time. I mean, I know I didn't play it at that time. like I play off-stream Survivor with friends, but like I just kind of like stopped doing that during that patch where Overbrine Eruption was meta, because like it just didn't feel good. It felt like I was losing despite doing absolutely nothing wrong, which obviously is not a good feeling. So I just kind of stopped playing DBD off stream during that patch. So yeah, fun at someone else's expense does over time drive people out of the game. So you can say till you're blue in the face that like, hey, DBD isn't as fun as it used to be. But DBD, realistically, by making all these balance changes, is acting in their own self-interest to protect the health of their game. Because you can't build a game off of fun at someone else's expense, because if you do that, the person that is footing that bill, getting the expense, will eventually stop playing, and that will screw over queue times. And then if, you know, people that even people that aren't invested in the whole like side v side thing, people who aren't super invested in Dead by Daylight and just kind of play it casually, will log on. The queue times will be too long, so then they don't want to play, so then they don't get on as much, and then, you know, they uninstall it at a certain point because they're like, I can never get a match, and it all goes downhill from there, right? I think Dead by Daylight, behavior in specific, going out of their way to balance things and keep things balanced, you may say, oh, well, it's boring because, you know, it's too balanced and all the fun's gone. But I think for the health of the game and the longevity of the game, it's objectively the right choice, because the whole point of them balancing is to remove the fun at someone else's expense aspect, which killed other ASIMs. So yeah, sorry, that was a little bit of it wasn't exactly a rant because I wasn't like mad or anything, but it was just kind of, that was a long one and I had a lot on my brain. But you know, that's what the commentary videos are for. So hopefully you enjoyed, friends. But I will see you in the tomorrow zone, because I do upload daily. But if I do not, I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.